Hey, this is Stone Cold Tech Support, and this is probably the sexiest memory I've ever seen. Looks are of course subjective, but these are right up my alley. These are the Corsair Dominator Platinum RGB. These are the 3600CL18. Nothing special, but when I checked what sort of ICs they had, it turns out this is Samsung B-die. Probably not the best binned B-die, but as we'll look at in a minute, they did okay. So first of all, the build quality is phenomenal. These are really solid sticks and quite heavy too. I would say build quality is a step above the G.Skill Trident C, which is quite a testament in and of itself. If you care about the lighting, it is important to have good software to control the lighting, and the IQ software from Corsair has a lot of features and can do pretty much anything you would want. In comparison, the G.Skill software is simpler, but it's also easier to use. Both of these sticks also work with the software that comes with your motherboard. The LEDs on the Dominator Platinums are really bright and vibrant, and the dims look good with the light turned off as well, in my opinion. But on to the important stuff. How do they perform and can they be overclocked? Validating the stability of a memory overclock is a really time-consuming process. I settled on the 1-hour AIDA64 stress test for these speeds. At stock voltages, I could run 3600CL16 no problem. Upping the voltage to 1.45 allowed us to run 3733 MHz at 14, 16, 16, 30. Any tighter and I ran into stability issues. This is slightly worse than the G.Skill 3200CL14 kit I have, and while the G.Skill kit hit a hard limit at 4000 MHz at 1.5 volts and wouldn't even post at anything above that, I could post at 4200 MHz with the Dominators, but it would crash before entering Windows. So I settled at 4066 MHz, which was stable, 1-hour AIDA64 stable anyway. For long-term use, I'm currently testing 3733 MHz 1515-1530 at 1.45 volts. The test system is an ASRock X470 Type G motherboard with a Ryzen R5 3600 CPU and an overclocked GTX 1070. Let's start off by looking at temperatures. During the AIDA64 stress test, the Dominators reached 16 C over ambient at XMP settings. This was a single degree better than the G.Skill kit. Once both were overclocked, they performed the same at 25 C over ambient. Now let's take a look at the latency. So here we can see that with the XMP profile, the Dominators have a decent latency for a 3rd gen Ryzen system, 70 nanoseconds. At 4066 MHz, that latency increases to 72.5 nanoseconds, which is still lower than what we saw with the 3200 MHz CL14 kit. At 3733 MHz, we were down to 64.7 nanoseconds, just under half a nanoseconds behind the G.Skill kit, which managed slightly tighter timings. Where I'm testing right now, I'm seeing around 65.3 nanoseconds. So what about read and write performance? First off, 3rd gen Ryzen write speed is crippled by the link between the CCD, the die with the cores, and the I/O die, which you can read more about in a link in the description. So we will focus on read performance. At the XMP settings, we are quite a ways ahead of the 3200 MHz CL14 kit, and when overclocked to 3733 MHz, we see a 10% increase in read speeds. At 4066 MHz, that decreases to 5%, but how does all of this affect day-to-day performance? We start off with a productivity workload in case you're the kind of person who's compressing and decompressing files day in and day out. Here are the 7-zip compression numbers. At the XMP settings, we're roughly at 45,000 kilobytes per second. When overclocked to 3733, that increases by 16% to 52,000 kilobytes per second, which again decreases to an 8% increase over stock at 4066 MHz. Decompression is next, and the 3733 MHz overclock is a bit over 1% faster, and again going further than 3733 MHz is cutting our performance increase in half to 0.5% over XMP at 4066 MHz. Next is video encoding in Handbrake. This is an averaged FPS figure. With XMP, we averaged 69.1 frames per second. When overclocked to 3733 MHz, that increases by a little more than 3%. And what do you think happened with our 4066 MHz overclock? Yes, you guessed it. It cut our performance increase in half, being 1.7% faster than the XMP settings. Now let's move on to gaming. We start off in Anno 1800, and here we're talking about really small differences. The 3733 MHz overclock is 1.2% faster than the XMP settings, and the 4066 MHz overclock is 0.5% faster than XMP. It did, however, have the worst 0.1% low frame times of the Dominators. Moving on to Witcher 3, here the 3733 MHz is 2% faster than our XMP settings, and the 4066 MHz overclock was about as fast. The same can be said for the current settings with CL50. Now the last game we're taking a look at is Elder Scrolls Online. In Elder Scrolls Online, the 3733 MHz overclock is almost 7% faster than the XMP settings. And with the 4066 MHz overclock, we see about half that, so 3.5% ahead of the XMP settings. So then, performance-wise, they're doing quite good, but what about value? Well, when talking value, things take a bit of a turn for the worse. When looking at PC Part Picker at the time of writing, they cost $180. That's quite expensive for what is some pretty slack XMP timings. The G.Skill Trident C3300 MHz CL14 can be had for $156, and the 3600 MHz CL16 Trident C kit can be had for $174. If you're the type of person who just want to set the XMP profile and be done with it, then the Trident Cs are the way to go. And if you care more about value than anything, then in a previous video we discovered that 3300 MHz CL16 was much better value than these kits. But if you like to tinker with your RAM timings and want the sexiest RAM available today, then the Corsair Dominator Platinum RGBs are superb. I don't know if all these kits are B-die. You can find the part number of this kit in the description. And that is all I have for you today. But before I go, I want to tell you that in the pipeline, I have videos where we attempt to fix a motherboard with the bricked BIOS. We found out if you should go with the Ryzen R7 2700 or the Ryzen R5 3600. We have my personal PC build and a Magic inspired PC build and more. If that sounds interesting to you, you can subscribe or you can just check back here later. Thank you so much for watching and farewell.